What's up, everybody? This is The Truth Hurts. I've been wanting to drop a video dealing with scriptures for a minute, because I know it's a lot of people out there like me who are really just now getting into that book and trying to understand it from a different perspective. So without delay, let's get into this. So many people cast aspersions on the Bible. Some of y'all claim it's the white man's book. Some say it's merely stolen myths from older writings. And some say it's entirely false. A construct designed to imprison man's consciousness and freedoms. What happens pretty much in all these instances is man confuses the Bible with religion. Man thinks the Bible and religion are synonymous. This is simply not true. Religion is actually just one particular group of people's interpretation of the Bible. A bad interpretation of the Bible in most cases. The Bible doesn't designate Sunday as a day of worship. The Bible doesn't promote slavery. The Bible doesn't recognize Christmas, Easter, or any other man-made holiday. You gotta read the Bible for yourself and stop assuming you know the Bible. You know of the Bible. As for the Bible locking down conscious thought, this is so funny to me. The Bible purposely leaves room for conscious thought. The book is designed for you to come to your own understanding. Unlike science, with these theories paraded as facts, the Bible gives you room to believe what you want to believe. You get the Bible confused with church. That's the problem. Man is the one who attempts to lock down your consciousness with his dogma, his self-serving religions, and as I mentioned, his science. These same people who frown on religion believe in evolution. Yeah, I said believe, because evolution is a theory. Never forget that. Evolution requires belief, suppositions, and faith, just like religion. I've heard it's dangerous to unteach evolution. Professors and scientists don't even want you to question it. Sounds an awful lot like religion. First off, we have two primary problems with evolution. One is there isn't a single shred of evidence to prove evolutionary development. By evolutionary development, I mean the transition of one species into another species. Nothing even close. Scientists have never been able to show an example of this transition, including investigating the fossil records. This whole idea is mere speculation. Yet science advances forward with the entire group of followers in tow. 2. According to the minimum gene set concept, no living organism, no matter how primary, can go below 200 genes. Nature magazine stated in one of their issues dated January 6, 2006, that life can never go below the border of 397 genes. Energy production alone requires at least 6 genes, and if a single gene is missing, the cell will not be able to provide any energy. Likewise, each and every basic function requires a minimum number of genes. Scientists have found that mycoplasma is the most accurate living organism on Earth. It has 468 genes, and each one of these genes contains complex proteins that could be within the range of 1,000 to 10,000 amino acids. Hence, if you have 3 billion specialized pieces of information like us, these pieces of information are embedded inside the nucleus of each cell to produce vital functions, or even 11,000 more new pieces of information per. So you're facing a giant treasure of specialized information that has just suddenly materialized out of nowhere. Evolutionists fantasized a life that started with 0 genes, but finally let that go after the minimum gene set was introduced. Proving life could not have started from the bare minimum one-celled model, period. We now know whenever and however you think life started, it indeed had to already be complex. Famous New York columnist Tom Wolfe went as far as to call Darwinism a myth. So before you so-called geniuses get your laugh on at the expense of a creationist, just know they're laughing even harder at you and your beliefs. But I'm not here to defend man-made religions. I'm here to talk about the book they supposedly go by, which is really a joke because that's what many of them do. They see it on the table and go right by it. The Bible isn't a religious book. It's not a book of myths. It is a history book from a particular people's point of view, namely the Hebrews. It's like a book written from the historical perspective of the slave rather than the master. So the book wasn't really concerned with the outsider understanding or believing. In fact, certain books were purposely ambiguous because the Hebrews were being persecuted and couldn't really say things straightforward. The book of Revelation comes to mind as a book written in code to only be understood by the initiate or persons relying on his or her divine spirit. That's why it's so difficult for most people to understand. Let's examine the book and see what the Spirit does for us. I'm going to examine 2 books of the Bible to show us examples of this book's incredible grasp of history and prophecy. Before we get started, I would ask that you relax your preconditioned ideas But by all means, research everything we cover. Both of these prophecies deal with nations, people, and events that no other ancient script has done nor can do. Also, these two books were written during very different time periods. The language in the book of Daniel, part of which is Aramaic, is dated after the Babylonian captivity in the 6th century BC to as late as 163 BC. The book of Revelation was written around 96 AD on the island of Patmos by an Ephesian known as John the Elder, because Rome exiled him there for his preaching. So these books are at least 260 years apart, and maybe even 600 years. Needless to say, Daniel and John were not contemporaries. One other thing we must remember: these books were written under duress, so a lot of the information was coded for obvious reasons. Nothing too sophisticated, but certainly enough to write above the heads of their respective enemies. So some basic tools you'll need to know. Your decoder ring, so to speak, is 1 day equals 1 year. 1 week of years equals 7 years. 1 3 equals 420 years. And 1 time equals 700 years. Okay, let's begin. To set up the book of Daniel, we need to know where the bulk of the information is drawn from. After a war in 605 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon attacked Jerusalem, ordering King Jehoiakim to pay them tribute. In the 4th year of this forced agreement, King Jehoiakim refused to pay, resulting in the eventual exile or deportation of his court and people of Jerusalem. Daniel was among these deportees. During Daniel's stay in Babylon, the Babylonian king, King Nebuchadnezzar, had a dream. The dream bothered the king so much, he ordered his wise men to interpret his dream, with one catch. In order to assure their accuracy of his dream, the king wouldn't reveal the content of his dream, instead telling the wise men to not only interpret the dream, but also tell him what he dreamed. Obviously, this was not going to happen. So the king ordered all the wise men, magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologists to be executed. It was claimed throughout the kingdom that no man was capable of doing this. When Daniel heard of this, he sought to accept this challenge in order to prove to the king and the world that the Most High is real and the only. Daniel prayed all night, and the next day went to the king and told him what he dreamed and what it meant. The dream was of a huge statue of a man. The man's head was pure gold. The chest and arms were silver. Its stomach and thighs were bronze, the legs iron, and his feet were partly iron and partly clay. In the dream, a rock not cut by human hands, hit the feet of the statue, and the whole image became like chaff on a threshing floor. A threshing floor is a place where farmers would thresh or separate grain from the plant. It's kind of important if you know that. The king was impressed because Daniel nailed it. Then Daniel proceeded to interpret the dream. He explained the statue and its material represented a series of kingdoms throughout history, with each one being less glorious than the one before it, as indicated by the decrease in the metals. The head of gold, Daniel explained, represented King Nebuchadnezzar, as the Most High has granted the king great power. The next kingdom will be inferior to you, king, Daniel said. And a third kingdom of bronze will rise and rule the earth. Then a fourth kingdom shall rise, strong as iron, because iron breaks everything into pieces. The final kingdom you saw, that was iron mixed with clay, represents a kingdom divided, partly strong with some iron and partly soft with the clay. The stone you witnessed that wasn't cut by human hands represents the Most High's smashing the final kingdom to bits and pieces. The four kingdoms that we see play out in history after Daniel's prophecy are, we already know Babylon. The next was Medo-Persian, followed by the Greek Empire, and finally the Roman Empire. King Nebuchadnezzar's empire was 539 BC. The chronological order of the next three kingdoms are as follows. Medo-Persia, picking up from 539 BC to 330 BC. Greece started in the 3rd century, and the final kingdom of Rome began in 168 BC until now. For those who believe the Roman Empire doesn't exist today, we'll tackle that too. Now, the Babylonian kingdom was supposed to be the most powerful kingdom on earth during its time, and only its beauty surpassed its strength. Thus, it was represented as gold. The Medo-Persian Empire was as strong, but not as beautiful, and it was a dual kingdom, as it was a merger of the Medes and the Persians. Represented as silver, and remember, the arms, two of them for the Medes and the Persians. One arm representing the Mede and the other the Persian. That's crazy. Forgive me, man, but this stuff is fascinating to me. Greece was next and was bronze, the belly and thighs. Greece toppled Egypt and the Asian continent, including the Medo-Persian dynasty, who had conquered Babylon. If y'all paying attention, these dominoes are actually falling right in chronological order. Because in 168 BC, Rome, which is represented as the legs, conquered Greece and all the territory Greece held. Now, what about the clay and the iron? What does that represent? Well, you see, Rome wasn't actually conquered from outsiders. but people already residing in and around Rome. So when Rome was conquered, you didn't see so much of a realignment or cultural change. Just the invading barbarians usurped Roman culture, leaving Rome pretty much intact. But there was a separation of the kingdom as it was split in two. You had the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. I think I did a video on that. Represented by the two legs of the statue. Man, this is crazy. Rome representing the legs, right? Because it's two different dynasties, two different legs. But what about the toes? The clay, and how does that work? What's the representation there? Well, the 10 toes represent the 10 major barbarian tribes. The Alemanni, who became the Germans. The Burgundians, who became the Swiss. The Franks, who became the French. The Lombards became the Italians. And the Saxons became the English. The Suevi became the Portuguese, and the Visigoths became Spain. You count it, that's only 7. And that's because the other 3, the Heruli, the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals, became extinct. You can actually read about that in Revelations. To understand Revelations, you'll have to pull your decoder ring back out. Where Revelation speaks of a body of water, like the sea, for instance, they're actually speaking of a mass of people, like a nation. Kind of like how we might describe a large gathering as a sea of people. Crowns represent kings and kingdoms. And the beast either stands for Satan or a nation Satan is using to do his bidding. These beasts were first mentioned in Daniel to describe the 4 kingdoms. In Daniel chapter 7, Babylon was represented as a lion with eagle wings. Medo-Persia was represented as a bear with 3 ribs in his mouth. And Rome was the leopard. Sidebar. Leopards are named for the spotty skin and come from the word leper. Just thought I'd throw that in there. And the clay and iron mixture of the 4th kingdom, the divided Roman Empire, was represented as a beast with iron teeth and 10 kingdoms, or 10 crowns. I hope you're keeping up with this because it's really amazing when you know what you're reading. Now in Daniel chapter 7 verse 8, he says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the root, or extinct. The question is, who is the little horn? Who is the little horn? To figure that out, let's compare the characteristics of this little horn with the powers that are in the world today. No huge leaps, just some straightforward research. And by the way, horns represent kings and kingdoms. You'll find that in Daniel 7 verse 24. So let's find this little horn. this baby horn. So we're looking for a small kingdom. Now remember, this little horn is coming from Europe, or Rome, or the 10 horns on the beast that represented Europe. So it's a little kingdom that will reside in Europe. So far, so good. When was Rome or Europe divided into 10 kingdoms? 476 AD. So this kingdom will have to present itself after. If it doesn't come after that date, the prophecy fails. After 476 AD. Another prophecy is that this little kingdom will uproot those 3 kingdoms that went extinct, or the 3 bones that were in the bear's mouth. In Daniel 7, verse 24, it says, "And 10 horns out of this kingdom," which is Europe, "are 10 kings that shall rise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings." This kingdom will have a man as a figurehead and speak great things against the Most High. Daniel 7 verse 8, and in Daniel 7 21 and 25 it says, "This little kingdom made war with the saints and prevailed against them, and they," meaning the saints, "shall be given into his hand until a time and times and times and a half." And last but not least, this little kingdom will look to change times and laws of the Most High. So as we look around, what kingdom fits these characteristics? How about the Vatican? We know the Vatican is one of the smallest kingdoms in the world. But did it spring up amongst the 10 kingdoms mentioned earlier after 476 AD? Yes. It was established in Rome, Italy by Justinian in 538 AD after the division of Rome in 476 AD. Did the Vatican cause those 3 kingdoms to go extinct? Because that's part of the prophecy. Yes, the Ostrogoths, the Vandals, and the Heruli were 3 kingdoms who refused to follow the Vatican, so the bishop, or Pope of Rome, called upon Justinian to get rid of those 3 tribes. And this caused their extinction. The Justinian Gothic War took place from 535 to 554 AD. Look it up. Was this a diverse kingdom? It's another prophecy. Absolutely. France was a kingdom. Germany was a kingdom. England was a kingdom. The Vatican itself was a church and a kingdom. And we all know it's represented by a man. So far, Daniel is nailing it. But does the Vatican speak great things against the Most High? Well, yes, they always have. Pope Pius X, when he was still an archbishop, claimed to be Jesus. In the great encyclical letters to Leo the 13th, page 304, has this as a proclamation. They claim to be the Most High on earth. The popes, I mean. It doesn't get more blasphemous than that. The Pope says he's the HNIC. But do they claim to have the power to forgive sin? I doubt that, because I'm sure even the Pope knows only the Most High can forgive sins. Oh, I forgot. He is the God on this earth, ain't he? Forgive me for my obsolescence. But has the Vatican made war with the saints? From the time Rome destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD, throughout the Inquisitions, the Vatican has been responsible for millions of deaths. But no evidence is greater than the slave trade, which the Vatican was behind with the papal bull. Has the Vatican changed or attempted to change times and dates? Yes. Christmas and Easter are not biblical. Sunday has not, nor ever will be, the Sabbath. The Greco-Roman calendar we use is not the original calendar. So far, it seems the Vatican fits the description perfectly. Now, when we look at Revelations, we see these concurring prophecies. In Revelations, many thought John the Elder was referring to Nero, the Roman emperor, in his writings. But we know that's impossible for him to be talking about any one man, as the prophecy spans more than 1,000 years. In Revelations 13, verse 1, we pick up John's writing, and it says, "When I saw a beast," remember, that means nation, "with 10 horns and 7 heads rising out of the sea. There were 10 royal crowns on its horns and blasphemous names on its head." Now, this is a whole nother book. "The beast I saw was like a leopard, with the feet of a bear and the mouth of a lion. And all the world wandered after the beast. And the dragon, who is, we know, Satan, gave the beast his power and throne and great authority. Do these beasts concur with the beast in Daniel? Let's see. In Revelation 17, John speaks of a woman sitting upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, this is the same beast from Revelation 13, but now a woman is sitting on the beast. But in Revelation 17:15, an angel explains to John the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth. Now we know who the woman is. Are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So the woman, or the whore, sits atop many peoples and many kingdoms. Anyone who knows anything of the Bible knows the church is always referred to as a female, a woman, as in the bride of Christ. We know the dragon is Satan, which he's referred to way back in Genesis. And it says, all will worship him, whose names are not found written in the book of life. So we can see we're dealing with a religious entity. Again, the Vatican. And we know the Vatican was given its power via Rome from Justinian in 538 AD. And her power was restored again in 1929 when Benito Mussolini signed the Lateran Treaty. But yo, there's more in Revelations 13:11. John beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. So this new beast or nation is going to literally be a wolf in sheep's clothing, looking like an innocent lamb of God, but speaking like the dragon. We can see it's a beast, so we know it's a new nation. And most of the beasts, if you remember, came up out of the sea or water, which means nations or densely populated regions. This new beast comes up out of the earth, which would represent not so populated lands, a new land. So who is this new beast from a new land? So we know it appears as a lamb, or Christ-like, or Christian, because that's what the lamb is. But in fact, it'll be in league with the dragon. And notice also, this beast didn't have any crowns, so it won't be a kingdom per se. Who do you think this beast could be? And what do you think these two horns represent that have no crowns? We know the horn represents power or kingdoms. And since this beast doesn't have a crown, the horns must represent powers. Two horns. So what are these two powers? Government and church. The two crowns represent the separation of powers, or the separation of government and church. Now, do you know what nation Revelations 13:11 is speaking of? None other than the United States, baby. I bet you thought the good old US of A wasn't in the Bible. The United States is the most powerful nation militarily on the planet. Of course, it's in the Bible. And just like prophecy, the United States rose as the Vatican fell. That was prophecy. And this new beast, the United States, exercises all the power of the first beast who was wounded, which of course is the Vatican. The Vatican was slowly losing power since the 11th century AD. By 1809, Napoleon Bonaparte captured Rome and held Pope Pius VII prisoner. Yet by this time, the second beast, or the United States, was on the scene and expressing all the power of the first beast, like the prophecy said. Check the history. It goes on to say, still we're in Revelations 13:11-14, that the second beast, the United States, caused everyone to worship the first beast whose wound had healed. That being in 1929 when Mussolini restored the Vatican to her sovereignty, granting her her power back. Now, all of this stuff is in the Bible. And to be honest, it gets deeper than that, with dates and all that. There's a video on YouTube called From Babylon to America. Homeboy breaks it all the way down. I don't agree with everything he says, but I do ride with the bulk of it. I hope y'all follow along and got a clear understanding of how prophecy works. I'm about to shut it down, but please, whatever you do, open that book and read it with a new understanding. Trust me, it's not the white man's book. In fact, he's the biggest villain in the book. Not all white men, but certainly the powers that be. Check out the 10 Commandments for starters, and see what you never saw before. Those first 3 commandments are spiritual and show your dedication to the Most High. The other 7 are physical and a manual on how to treat people living in this time and space. Peace.